certain unpleasant characters are being thrown to the fore.
The last count we heard from you, I think you had 6.
No, because you've actually got to have 8 to
but
go
you've got
forward.
up to
They're
6
all
so
done.
far.
Do you remember Esther McVeigh from her GMTV days?
So you got on with Esther then, Lorraine?
I don't remember, love.
Oh, big skin killer.
This is the What and the Why podcast for the week ending the 14th of June, 2019. And please remember, just say no.
Esther McVeigh, 9.
Welcome to podcast 33, a number made famous by the film The 33, about the Chilean miners who emerged from the depths and in which Antonio Banderas, Juliette Binoche and everybody else speaks English but with a Spanish accent. In this week's episode...
I feel a burning pain keep on burning in my bloody brain. I've got cocaine running around my brain. I've got cocaine running around my brain.
Yes, lip-smacking, motivating, good-buzzing, cool-talking, high-walking, fast-living, ever-giving, cool-fizzing... coke, opium and marijuana. Yes, it's the race to be the next Prime Minister of this great land of opium and glory. Also, there's this little catchy little number from an Iranian pop singer. Yes, apparently this arrogant world is ready for World War III against us, and apparently we hear the satanic voice of imperialist Jews from the throat of the Saudi king. Our blades will answer you on the battlefield. Apparently we're ready for conflict in the Yemen, in Lebanon and Iraq, etc., etc., ad nauseum. And Joe Brand gets all caustic. Plus our film section, which we call our film section. And the What and the Why podcast this week is sponsored by the animal which sleeps the longest each day, the koala bear, because this podcast is officially good for insomnia. Speaking of which, here's jive-talking, sleepwalking...
David Worwell. Sorry, I was trying to do throat singing, but that didn't work, did it? Really?
Oh, you love the throat singing, don't you?
I'm addicted to throat singing all week.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I'm very happy to have introduced you to the joys of the Tuvan Mongolian throat singers of the world.
I found an album of it on Amazon Music, so I've been listening to some really weird Chinese stuff.
Well, Dr. David Waywell, I have a question for you.
Go on.
Well, actually, I've got two, but if I was to say China, Boris, what would you do?
We'll have to see, but I think it's pretty obvious. Well, I mean,
all right,
China. I just said it, didn't I? Yeah.
That country next to India, yeah.
Well, I will do that one then, and then it's got to immediately come after the word. So Chinese doesn't count, you see. I've got to set myself some rules here.
Yeah, but what I've really done there is try to set you up that you segue a China and a Boris.
Well,
and it'll just flow beautifully.
No, you see, it won't. You see, no, it'll say the first word, and then it'll be like Trump, and then you'll say the second word, and then it'll be the mumbling. So that's how it works.
Well, all right. Can you then put them together now and see how it sounds?
Okay, just for you.
China. China. Well,
Thank you. My real question, Dr. Waywell, is why are there 5 syllables in the word monosyllabic?
Yeah. You've got me stumped on that one. Yeah.
I mean, it should be a one syllable word, shouldn't it, for monosyllabic, not 5.
This is like what's that? Steve, whatever is the great comedian always used to come out with these kinds of questions. Steve, the American. Oh, I forgot his name. Oh, I forgot. Yeah. Oh, God, I forgot the name of that American film star as well.
Martin?
No, it's not Steve Martin. I'll remember it.
Okay. Any good books recently?
Steve Wright. Sorry. Yeah, I read the new. I did actually read the new Thomas Harris this week. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah,
I don't know who Thomas Harris is.
He created Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I'm reading the. I'm glad you asked. I'm reading the same book as I was last week because it's actually quite good about the suicide bombers.
Oh yeah.
And it's getting better and better.
So you're more convinced that suicide bombers have shaped the world?
No, but I'm more convinced that it's a good book. Right, item 1. Boris, Gove, Rory. What do you make of all this this drug-fuelled fest that is British politics?
Well, it depends whether you want to have a conversation about drugs or whether you want to have a conversation about political point scoring and hypocrisy. Because there's two separate debates to be had. I mean, whether somebody has had drugs in the past, the distant past often, is any prohibits them from becoming Prime Minister or even a politician is one question, and I don't think it does. And then there's another conversation about, well, this is all about what, on one hand, some of them are trying to get out ahead of the bad news. Like, I thought the way Rory Stewart did it was kind of sensible. The way that Gove's done it is even, just as sensible, although I think he was forced into it because there was going to be a newspaper revelation on. Yeah,
there's a book coming out in which the account is told, and so a newspaper got hold of that, and he thought, well, it's obviously going to come out anyway, so off he came clean.
And then Boris is not really. He's trying to. I mean, it's been reported in the past.
David, you just said Boris.
I brew,
Oh no! Yeah, Johnson.
Mr. Johnson.
Johnson.
Yes.
No, I mean it's a serious point. That's why I do. I mean, I've been doing it on Twitter all week. Somebody told me off for using the word Johnson because it put images in their heads. But
well, one of the I think it's it might have been the Spectator have started saying Mr. Johnson, and someone took them to task for it, saying I think it might have even been Tim Montgomery, who was one of the sort of leading lights on the Tory social media, and. Yeah, he said, "Oh, look, it's ridiculous. We're past it."
No, I don't think so.
Everybody knows him as Boris, but yeah, I know the point you make is that
it's the Alistair Campbell point. Yeah,
it does. It makes him into a cuddly figure, which he may or may not be.
Well, I just don't think we should be sort of loading the language if we're talking about a prime minister, and we're trying to take out this sort of rather silly attitude we have to. This is the problem with politics at the moment, isn't it? We're obsessed with personality and. It's the "have I got news for you" kind of syndrome where these people who are a little bit, you'd normally feel a little bit uncomfortable with them, or you should interrogate them about the policies, and you see them on there having a bit of a laugh, and you somehow, they're all right, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's not a double-edged sword. It's something else. There's several other points in there, and that is that in this day and age, to attract attention to your policies, which are serious things, and to yourself, which might be a serious thing, you need to engage with a mass audience.
Yeah.
And increasingly the way to do that is to have a personality. So consequently, you have to do stuff like get stuck on zip wires or whatever.
Yeah, but the vicious cycle is that. I mean, yesterday Trump had Kim Kardashian speaking from the presidential podium. Ugh. I mean, we're sliding into that whole area that, I mean, I know people laugh about it, but, we are going to eventually have our own Trump. It's going to be either Ant or Deck, depending on how your attitude towards drugs.
That is a slur on Mr. Ant and Mr. Deck, because they might, you're comparing them almost to Trump. Did you see Trump's tweet about the Prince of Wales?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
which he spelt for other listeners who didn't catch it, WHALES.
I like the fact that the tweet also contained, "I've spoken to the Queen of England (UK).
And Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I know we've
diverted you.
We've digressed a little bit away, but I don't know. Is drugs an issue? I mean,
yes, it is.
Yeah, I suppose it is, but
yes, it is. Okay, I accept your first point that we all have lies before we went into politics. Sorry, that was if I was a politician, that's what I would say, and because I think it's Leadsom said that. However. That's different to in your 30s, taking cocaine, and then having done it several times as a grown adult, you then go on to be Justice Secretary and other Secretaries of State, in which you enact policies and promote policies to put people in jail for what you have done.
Well, I think the one that everybody highlighted, I think, was hypocrisy, was that when Gove was Education Secretary, he introduced a policy that if you're taking drugs, you can't be a teacher.
A teacher, yeah. So if you're taking drugs, you can't be a politician by that logic.
Yeah. No, you see, myself as a clean living individual who, never takes drugs and doesn't really drink, to me, I would like to think that politicians have that sort of, they knew they were going to be a politician, and I have a sense that, keep away from certain things. But at the same time, it worries me is how many politicians how many good politicians would completely be ruled out of public service. I'm a little bit, conflicted on this.
No, I agree with you, but it is it's not the taking of the drug. It's the aftermath. It's that thing in that classic phrase. It's always the cover up. Now, okay, he didn't cover up, but then it's the potential of hypocrisy. Then, if we come to Boris Johnson, who said, "I think I was once given cocaine, but I sneezed, and so it did not go up my nose."
Yeah.
Now, actually, I'm going to link that to the Gove one, because when Gove...
Let me just quickly say, though, he's nicking that... he's been accused of nicking Raymond Chandler's language this week in one of his novels. That is actually stolen from Woody Allen's Annie Hall, where he sniffs cocaine and sneezes and blows it all across the room. So I think he's just, I think he's being tricky around the...
Economical with the truth, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the link there's also the Bill Clinton defence. I didn't inhale. Mr. Gove said on Andrew Marr that he had not lied about this. Marr then asked him, "Well, what about if you've been to the States? Because you have to fill in a form, and it asks you on that form, have you ever taken Category A drugs? And you have to tick yes or no." At that point, Mr. Gove said, "Let me tell you, Andrew, if I've been asked directly, I have always answered truthfully." And my alarm bell at that point went. He introduced this word directly. And I was astonished when Andrew Marr just swerved off and asked him something else. Because that was the moment where, whoa, what do you mean directly? Because I think that word means, well, obviously, in terms of a conversation, if somebody asked me directly. So, no, I wasn't lying. When? Because I wasn't referring to a government form. Now, if Mr. Gove ticked that, because you have to fill in this visa to go to the United States of America, which he has done, if he ticked no, and he has lied on a government official document, I think that'd be quite serious.
Yeah, I agree. He gave one of those loyally answers, didn't he? Where you kind of, it's very clever with language. But I would also, I think one of the themes of this week's podcast might well be the word context. And I think you have to understand the context of each case. Rory Stewart took opium, but he was in Afghanistan at the time.
It was in Iran, which is, and again, it's almost a social thing in the tribal areas he was in. And he was upfront and honest about it.
Exactly.
Hang on. But this is the problem with Johnson and Gove's responses. I'm not thoroughly convinced by Mr. Gove's answer about he's never lied about it, and Johnson. So that quote I just said, I think it was cocaine, I sneezed, didn't go up the nose, I might have been doing icing sugar, ha ha ha. At that point we're all supposed to laugh, and then he's diverted the point. But hang on, he later told GQ magazine, "I tried it at university and I remembered it vividly. It achieved no pharmacological, psychotropic or any other effect on me whatsoever." So hang on, that's different for it not going up his nose. So that's, we go back to your very first point about hypocrisy. Either do it, say I did it, and we move on, but don't do it and then start prevaricating.
Yeah, but I think there's two points to make. One, I think what he's doing is what we were talking about when we were talking about how we're using that name to represent him rather than calling him Johnson. By him sort of turning it into a comic escapade, it's achieving an almost P.G. Woodhousesian, oh yes, I was there, oh it was a funny lark, ha ha ha. Right, so that's one. Two, I think the reason I say context is important, and I think that was important in this case of Stewart, But there's marijuana, which is like the one that most politicians eventually admit to. And you have
Esther McVeigh, Matt Hancock, Dominic Raab, and Andrea Leadsom all smoked cannabis.
I know, and you understand that there's a difference in severity between that and cocaine, and heroin, but none have admitted to heroin yet. So you've got to understand there's a difference in severity, difference in law, but there's also a difference in context. That marijuana is usually associated with student days. It's an act of rebellion. What you were saying about Michael Gove taking cocaine in his 30s, that's indicative of a habit of mind which says these laws. This is a severe case of breaking the law. These laws don't apply to me because of my social circumstance. So I think that's where it becomes very, very problematic for him.
And there you are in your early 30s at your, I'm sorry to be cliche, but your Chelsea dinner party or whatever. Yeah. And yes, not to people like us, but along that chain, there will have been a murder in Colombia somewhere connected to the coke he'd stuck up his nose, and some kid in a South London estate has maybe been stabbed because he didn't sell the right amount to whoever, and that is in a direct line of chain to that dining room table.
And the mules who have to swallow it and then it bursts in their intestines and they die of drugs over. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge list of causality there. Yeah, so I agree, and that's why there are different levels of punishment for the different kinds of drugs use. And
so kids don't do drugs.
Yeah, and it's also
and I've done loads, I can tell you. Oh, I have, but I have.
All right. Well,
I was younger.
Oh, yeah.
I was a lot younger.
Well, okay. Let me ask you a question, because is it true that
I'm not going to answer that? I'm not standing to be president of the United States.
No, I'm not asking. I'm not asking about that. Martin Rowson had tweeted.
It was marijuana things you're asking.
Martin Rowson was saying that it was an open secret about Gove's drug.
Oh, and a bit of speed and all. Sorry. And there was poppers when I was younger, but that's just rubbish. Sorry, go on. And Pro Plus, it doesn't matter how many Pro Plus you put in a can of Coke, you still... Anyway, sorry, go on.
Anyway. Martin Rowson had tweeted earlier in the week that it's actually an open...
Oh, and that crack... Sorry, go on.
Okay.
It gives you memory loss,
I know. Does it?
What does?
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll carry on now. Martin Rowson tweeted that it was an open secret about Gove's drug use earlier in the week. And he was saying basically media in the 90s, it was like you couldn't turn around without stumbling across it. And he claims that like every newspaper and newsroom in the world is like still not dominated by it, but it's still around.
Oh, it's around. But listen, no, he's right. In the 80s and the 90s, Coke was everywhere in the media. I didn't do it, as it happens. I have done speed and I have done marijuana when I was much younger, but Coke was everywhere. Yeah, I knew several people.
So it seems seems a little bit silly to try to even like Johnson did deny it. I mean, he's been around. I mean, he's not a young man anymore. I mean, actually, I thought for the first time I saw when he appeared on TV, I thought he looked old the other day. I think he's lost a bit of weight.
I agree. Yeah, he is looking... Because I did a back-to-back viewing of an interview he did this week, and then the Eddie Mair interview he did when Eddie Mair said, "You're a nasty piece of work." Yeah. And that's only a few years ago, and he's accelerated his aging.
I think it's his new girlfriend. I think apparently she's very media savvy, and she's got him to lose weight. So
I thought you were saying that's why he's so tired. I thought, where are you going with this? This is a family podcast.
No.
Anyway, look,
as is the case with many men who are larger in frame, that when they start to lose weight, they can age very quickly, can't they?
Yeah, I've kind of lost. Look at Mr. Blair. I've kind of lost track of time, but that's what drugs. That's what drugs does to you. My favourite quote was from Jeremy Hunt, who said he might have once tried cannabis in his youth, telling the Times, "I think I had a cannabis lassie when I went backpacking through India." Yeah, well, I mean, surely, why isn't the nation up in arms about this mistreatment of dogs? That's the bit I don't get.
Very good. But cannabis grows bloody in the wilds out there, don't it? It's like...
I was once as you do, I was walking through a minefield in Helmand province in Afghanistan a few years on my holidays that summer. And luckily there was this massive Royal Marine in front of me from Fiji, as I remember. And so I was just putting my feet wherever his feet had been. Anyway, he suddenly knelt down and rooted up this enormous plant. And it was only at that point, because I was so frightened, I think I probably had my eyes shut. it was actually a complete field, like a massive field of cannabis plants. And he just pulled it up and was smelling it and smiling at me because he was a lot braver than I was.
Yeah, I will say that Jeremy Hunt's the one candidate who surprised me and has actually impressed me in a way. I've been.
He's a clever fella, and he has a plausible manner.
Yeah.
So before to finish this off, who's going to win?
Oh, it's Boris.
Bum.
I mean, it's all over now.
Probably.
It's all over.
No, it is not all over. A week is a long time in politics. That's a phrase I've just made up. Feel free to use it.
Well, yeah.
Look.
It could self-destruct.
I think Rab is finished. I think Gove is absolutely struggling, but I think Sajid Javid, very unlikely, but he could come through on the rails. And Hunt, you can't rule him out. But yes, you're right. The maths, both in Parliament and then amongst the membership, gives it to that man whose name we don't say because it's called Boris.
I think the fact is he's won Parliament because he needed 100 and was it 117 he needs, so he needs another 3 more, I think, to have won.
Oh, he's there,
and goes to the country. They adore him, the Tory grassroots. They've been crying out for him for donkey's years. So,
well, this is the Churchillian figure in waiting. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, shall we move on to World War III?
Yeah, let's.
Go on then.
Oh, me. Boom.
You started it.
God. You're not going to give the context because I am.
Yes,
I am
absolutely.
absolutely.
Well,
lost.
I mean, I think everybody knows by now the 2 tankers went up. Immediately, America has pointed the finger of blame at Iran. Back come other people saying, "Do you think they would be so stupid, Iran, to do that at this time?" To which the answer is yes, but it's not necessarily stupid. Which is where the story.
Well,
is.
that's why I wanted to ask you, because I've read a lot of people talking about false flag operations.
Yeah, people love saying false flag because it makes them look like they know a bit of history.
The Gulf of Tonkin.
Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam, all that. Yeah.
And the fact is, I mean, I know they've released a video this morning which they claim shows Iranians taking a Olympic mine off the side of one of the ships. And there's been some photographs which suggest that there was another mine attached to one of the ships. But it all comes down to, can you explain why Iran would want to do this?
Yes.
Go on.
Oh, you want me to? Oh, right. Sorry, I was just answering your question. Yes, I can. Oh, right, I will then. Where do I start? Well, probably with the death of Ali Hussein in the Battle of Karbala in the 600s. But I'll fast forward. All right, why would they, when the Americans have got a fleet in Bahrain and they've just sent the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier in there and some extra B-52 bombers? Well, because they know that was the Americans signalling, you knew what we knew. We were sending that aircraft carrier there anyway, but clearly if John Bolton makes such a song and dance about it in public, you know, and we know that you know that you know that we know that we're signalling to you, watch it. Okay. Back comes Iran with their own signal. If it was them last month. You remember we've always said to you we can close the Strait of Hormuz anytime we want.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. Four tankers, 4 ships.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the new one, 2 tankers. And where were these tankers? They were by the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. What were they carrying? They were carrying products from Saudi Arabia and UAE. This is not a coincidence that Saudi Arabia and UAE are the 2 countries most active in Yemen. And in the Yemeni war, they are supporting one side and the Iranians are supporting the other side, the Houthis. So it's not a coincidence that the products were from Saudi Arabia and UAE. Right. And one of these tankers turns out to be Japanese. Yeah. Oh, and who happened to be in Tehran that day? Well, it was the Japanese Prime Minister, Abe. Why was he there? Because Mr. Trump had asked him to go there and deliver a message saying, look, we need to sort all this out.
Yeah.
The Supreme Leader Khamenei's response was, sling your hook. He said, I do not see Trump as worthy of any message exchange and I do not have a reply for him now or in the future, said the Supreme Leader. This is another signal blowing up a Japanese tanker. And it's plausible deniability that there's not the proof that it's Iran, so consequently you're not necessarily going to go to war over it. Even if there is proof, they haven't attacked an American, but what they have is said, remember we said we could close the Strait of Hormuz? It's all entirely plausible that the Iranians did it for those reasons, because they are both still signalling. Now, the problem with all this is, and I think that's what it is, signalling. And they all know how to read each other's signals. And that is the timing. I mean, some people were saying, why on earth would they do it when the Japanese Prime Minister was there?
It's a reminder to him.
Well, they're doing it because the Japanese Prime Minister is there. That's why they're doing it.
It's a reminder to tell him that he's got his interests here and he's be careful, otherwise you're going to...
It's a big stick it, Mr. Trump. Now, the next bit is why it's so dangerous. Now, the Americans have pulled out of the nuclear deal. The Europeans haven't. But the Iranians are so angry, and they have stuck by this deal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they are in breach of it. They've stuck by it. But the Europeans are not delivering their side of things, because the Europeans are so scared of falling foul of American sanctions that they're not investing. They're not even going around the houses trying to find ways of buying products from Iran, because if a company buys a product directly from Iran, they may fall foul of American sanctions. So what you do, and the EU has devised this, you go through a third party. Let's say you go through Turkey, and they are the middle, and then they go on. So, or a neutral nation. So you try to avoid any sanctions, but they're simply not doing it, and so the Iranian economy is tanking. So what the Iranians are going to do? They've got to start using their few levers of power, and they are now rattling a bit of a saber. Look, we can close the Strait of Hormuz with 30% of the world's energy going through it. The reason it's so incredibly dangerous is because the Americans have got so much kit down there now, and because there is no channel of communication, direct line of comms between them. Now, in the Cold War, Moscow and Washington had a phone. You could pick it up and somebody would answer it a second later. So if an incident has happened, it's a matter of seconds and then minutes before the leadership can actually talk. In this scenario, in which a situation where perhaps, let's say, an American warship might have been under attack by a mistake or whatever, you've got no lines of communication. Right, the last bit of this, why it's so dangerous. At that point, when there's been a military incident between these two nations who are almost on a hair trigger, the real danger is with the Iranians escalating, and that's because their kit is use it or lose it.
Yeah.
All their coastal anti-ship missile batteries, which are lined up along the coast, pointing out towards the Gulf where the American ships would be, all their fast boats, which they would swarm these big American battleships with dozens of fast boats and just crash into them because they're pretty good at suicide bombing. They are all in port, in bases. They are clustered together. The Iranians know once something has started to happen and people are going to hopefully try and de-escalate, they know if the Americans make the next move, they are going to smash everything we've got.
But you've done it before,
at which
haven't
point, there is a temptation at that point to use it or risk losing it. Now, in the Cold War, the nuclear, this is exactly the same as the whole nuclear stance in the 80s. There was this danger of use it or lose it, but when they had this mechanism to talk to each other. These two don't have the mechanism, which is why it is so dangerous, even though it may not come to it, because they're both signaling they don't want a war. I mean, people that don't get a lot of this stuff think that because something's blown up, you're signaling you do want a war. You're not. You're actually signaling you don't want a war. But the danger is there for the reasons I've just laid out. I'm sorry to be so long-winded.
No, it gave the context, because what had surprised me was, so far, I mean, you look at this, I mean, traditionally we've always been on the American side and the Iranians have played the bad guys. But under Trump, it's Trump who's been forward-leaning, especially with John Bolton coming in, because it was almost prophesised that America would end up getting into conflict with Iran once Bolton got in there. So
it's Bolton and Pompeo, the Secretary of State. They're the two hawks on this, and it's Trump reining them in.
It is actually, because like I said before, I don't think he wants his presidency to be marked by a war, and I think it's got enough problems. But yeah, it's just strange how it seems. I mean, this is why I think people are saying false flag and bringing up the Gulf of Tonkin, is that it seemed that Iran was losing sympathy, because if it is proved to be them, then it's them provoking the Americans. But what you're saying is it's more of a warning shot across the American bows to say this isn't going to go as cleanly as you expect it's going to go.
Yeah. And also, I mean, people who say, "Oh, this looks like false flag," they seem to think that nothing ever happens anywhere and nobody ever does anything. You know, it's only ever the evil West. Any single event that happens anywhere in the world, you'll get these people saying, "Oh, this is a false flag operation." Yeah, I mean, they have happened. You can't rule it out. There is such a thing of Gulf of Tonkin, what the Japanese did in China in the 30s as pretext, what the Germans, the Russians. Yes, it does happen.
Of course it does. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's America. I mean, there's enough players in the opera. I mean, Russia would have a hell of a lot to gain, wouldn't they?
Yeah, there's all. But I mean, that sort of stuff is all interesting to sort of loosely kick about. But if you're talking about the hard analysis, that's the peripheral stuff.
It comes down to Occam's razor again. The simple solution is usually the one that, I mean, the Iranians are in the place to do that. They've got a history of doing it. It's probably the Iranians.
Yeah. And lastly, before we move on to another minefield, again, I mean, I'm open. This limpet mine that the Iranians have been filmed taking off the ship. The Americans are using it to say, "Oh, you see, you know, they got one and used it, and now they're quickly getting to the scene of the crime to take away the evidence." And that's plausible, because if the Americans can get to the debris first, if it is a state actor, there will be a trail from the debris of munitions that were used. But you could say, well, hang on, no, the Iranians got there first, tried to rescue, and oh dear, some nefarious person has stuck another mine on there. We've got the expertise. We're going to save you by taking it off. So I'm open-minded.
I've watched enough episodes of Columbo. You can't prove something just because you've been found with a murder weapon, can you?
No. Yes. And Chandler. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring friends into this. Shall we move on to, I was going to say, what's her name?
Jo Brand.
Oh, yeah, Jo Brand.
Oh.
Joe, we are absolutely united in feeling we are living through a terrible time from a parliamentary point of view.
Well, yes, I would say that, but I think that's because, and they're very, very easy to hate. And I'm kind of thinking, why bother with a milkshake when you could get some battery acid? That's just me, and it's all right. I'm not going to do it. It's purely a fantasy, but I think milkshakes are pathetic.
You're a comedian.
I just find that
they're not laughing now, are they?
Oh, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I mean, yes.
Oh, I hope we can disagree about this.
I suspect we're going to disagree with it, because I suspect you're going to say it was a terrible thing to say in the present context of politics and all that.
Yep.
And I'd agree with you, except I just want to have context again, because it's the context of a comedian who's known to stretch the bounds of good taste on a show which is known to stretch the bounds of good taste, making a joke which I admit I laughed at when I heard it because it was so terribly over the top and too much. And that's the nature of bad taste comedy. And I've been in the same boat that she's in now.
No, you haven't.
Too many times in my life.
You've never said anything as unpleasant as that in your life, mate.
I have made jokes, nothing as bad as that, but I've offended enough people with my humour.
I don't accept your. I don't know what you're on about, to be perfectly honest. Hang on, all this context that you've given me is absolutely true. I get all that. Hang on, I get her right to say it. I think it's silly that the police have been called into it, and they have officially. I get all that. I'm not talking about freedom of speech. I'm not talking about the context is of this particular programme. It's just a horrible, nasty thing to say.
It is. I agree. And there's a whole history of horrible, nasty things
So
to say.
why is she saying, "Oh, freedom of speech"? Yeah, you've got the freedom of speech. It doesn't mean you're not really unpleasant for having said it.
Of course, she's really unpleasant. I can't stand Joe Brand. Joe Brand has a whole history of making jokes which are horrible jokes, and I don't like her. I won't watch her.
Well, I'm going to come to a couple of those, and one of them's not bad. But go on.
But what bothers me more about this is what's happening around it, because this is being used by a lot of those people on the right to point to those on the left and say, you don't like it when somebody comes out with a joke you find offensive, because of the left attacking the right for making comments about identity politics and all that. So that's what it's about. Now, to the credit, I mean, 2 weeks ago, or was it a week ago, Spiked Online ran a comedy club in London where it was Comedy Unleashed or something. And the whole point of it was, we're going to come out with comedy which is so offensive, but it's all about free speech. And to their credit, they've said to her, we're not going to make a point of it. But it's the points scoring on both sides. It is. I just wanted people to recognise it's a comedian in a comedic context is different than a politician in a political context saying something deeply offensive. Now, I agree. I don't like it, and there's a whole manner of ways you can show your displeasure about that. But let's recognise that this is just bloody point scoring by those sanctimonious lot on the left having a go at the sanctimonious lot on the right.
I haven't got into all that, and I think you're right. The sanctimonious, and there's so much, possibly including myself, of that about at the moment, and it is, the left is so bloody pious and sanctimonious, and the right are so bloody pious and sanctimonious, and yes, they are using this issue. I'm not really into all those debates. I am simply trying to it's a horrible thing to say.
It is, yes.
In this political environment, I mean, look, okay, comedians, right? Yeah, what is so cool about them being able to say really horrible, nasty things?
Okay.
Why is that like?
Because I think that's
why is that funny?
I think that's one of the responsibilities of comedy, and I know this. No, I know this is This is not a conversation because you can go, oh Jesus, you don't really believe that, right? I don't like the joke. But I could see why she did it as a joke, because comedians are always thinking about those things that you're not meant to say and you do say. Now, if the joke has had a purpose, people laugh at it because it's it's exposing some horrible fundamental thing that people think but they don't necessarily want to ever say, and it makes you reassess it. I think it takes a little bit of the toxicity away from it, because I never believed
it's mean.
It is mean, but people are mean,
right.
And I think that's
what is funny about meanness?
Because all comedy is mean. Chaplin, it was a famous quote by Chaplin about comedy being cruelty. There is always some element of a victim in.
Well, this is what I meant about me being pious, because if I see someone fall over in the street, I tend not to laugh. I've never really understood why people laugh at people falling over in the street.
Because all comedy, when you come down to it, is a sense of from Dad's Army. Everybody chuckles away at Captain Mannering, but he's one of the most repulsive human beings you find.
He's not. He's a very warm character who's completely flawed and can never get over the fact that he's a provincial bank manager whose sergeant major is incredibly cleverer than he is.
He is, but if you look at I was perhaps I'm unfair to say he's like a deeply horrible character, because he is, as you say, a lovable character in a way because of his flaws, but those flaws expose themselves in rather sometimes cruel ways.
I just think we're on a completely different page if you talk about Dad's Army and that.
What I'm saying is, if you take the most innocuous comedy, there is often a kernel of kind of cruelty, or exposing some vulnerability about our natures and something which makes us unpleasant. And you can go all the way up to Derek and Clive, which was all about exposing. Let's see how ugly humans can be, and they did that in atrocious ways, which often aren't funny. But what I'm saying is comedy is often about, it has to be transgressive, and you have to protect the transgressive nature of comedy, because these sanctimonious lot who come along and say, we'll shut Joe Brand down today, will come down and shut down somebody else tomorrow.
I don't want to shut her down. And she's perfectly welcome to say things like that. But it's people that think there is nothing wrong with saying things like that, which and I think there is something wrong with it. I wouldn't ever legislate against it, but she is sanctimonious because she gets on her high horse on all sorts of stuff. And this is another issue I have with comedy, and whether it's left or right, people choose easy targets for cheap, easy laughs. I think that was a cheap, easy laugh about a subject which, this is the crux of it, isn't it? You, as a comedian, will probably say there are no limits.
I've gone through my life having real struggles with this argument because it comes back to the free speech argument, and I am right. I know you say there's some things you can't say, and I do agree with that, but then I'll hear another argument, and I think I'd rather have ugliness exposed so we can attack it and we can talk about it rather than keep these things under the surface. I think
you know that there is a law in this country against incitement to murder. I'm not saying that joke was.
Yeah.
Leave that to one side. You can't say it, and it's quite possible that you agree we should have a law against incitement to murder. So you can't go around handing out leaflets saying, please kill this person or that ethnic group. We agree there should be censorship on that. But the comedians come in and say, I should be able to say absolutely anything I want. And I just find that arrogant.
I know what you're saying, but I'll tell you how this argument will be interpreted. Those people who have got right-wing views and who are deeply offended with it will think, well, yeah, that proves we're right. It was deeply offensive and we should shut down these people. And free speech, it will be used by both parties to argue. I don't want to give any credence to the sanctimonious lot. That's why I agree with you. I do not like Jo Brand. And if people don't like her, don't watch her. I think there's a problem with her being on the BBC, which is publicly funded. There is a problem with... they've banned Jerry Sadovich. He's not been on TV for donkey's years because... And he was banned, I think, partly because he said that Jimmy Savile was a paedophile. He was one of the first people to say it. He was banned from the BBC. So there is there are double standards. I agree with people pointing out the fact that they kicked Danny Baker off. Now, as we discussed about Danny Baker, I thought that was an overreaction. I don't think he was meaning the joke. Here, you could argue that the joke does mean what it says on the tin. It is a
deliberate.
It is a deliberate joke. But in the nature of comedy, I'm not protecting comedy too much, but I do think you have to understand there's a She was bringing politics into comedy. She was not bringing comedy into politics.
And it's so edgy, isn't it? But people like that have never been near an edge in their lives.
I don't know. She's an ex-psychiatric nurse. She's, I just think we've got to be careful around comedy. I mean, we're going to talk in a while about cartoons in the New York Times.
Oh, aye. Actually, yeah. Should we move on after I entertain you with a classic piece of Daily Mail writing? This was just fantastic. About Jo Brand. Speaking outside her home from her 1 million... I'll start that again in my Daily Mail speak. Speaking outside her 1.9 million detached home in Dulwich, southeast London today, Brand, 61, was clutching a cup of coffee with damned written on the front. She laughed as she was driven away from the property to attend a launch for her latest book in Henley-on-Thames. I just love that. Speaking from a 1.9 million detached home in Dulwich.
That's loaded, but it's speaking to the audience, isn't it? It's vilifying her. Oh, she's got all that money. Oh, she's going to Henley-on-Thames. Oh,
yeah, you're not allowed. Well, if you got money, you can't do anything. Can I tell you one of her jokes?
Well, I don't really want them because they all hate men. But fine. I mean, don't offend me. But...
This is a family podcast, so please do cover the children's ears at this point. The BBC Trust cleared her of insulting when she said Lady Thatcher sounded like a hair removal device. It's not bad.
Oh yeah, go on. Okay, yeah, it's not very good, but go on.
I'm not going to. Should we move on? Has a doctor written anything this week? Oh, by the way, sorry, I'm really chuffed that we've fallen out over this. I am. We always agree with each other.
Yeah, but it's just, I mean, you've got to understand the context of me. I've had death threats in the past from things I've written, and they were innocuous things I've written and drawn and lampooned. The sanctimonious on both sides. I tend to overprotect comedians, even though I often dislike them. but I accept that.
Yeah, you're all in it together.
We're all in it together. Yeah. All right, okay, Dr. Wright. I'm going to bore you now.
Dr. Wright.
It was E3 this week, which ended yesterday. It was the big video games conference, which bores you silly, but there's some interesting context to this. I know. The video games industry raises 180 billion in revenue each year in 2018, actually, compared to only 51 billion for movies. So it's 3 times the size of the Hollywood, industry. But the big takeaway was nothing much happened. Everybody's waiting for new consoles from the 2 big companies, Sony and Microsoft, which are going to appear next year. But what we did learn is that streaming video games is going to be a big industry in the future. I mean, they're tapping into the whole idea of streaming music, streaming, Netflix, movies. All sounds great, but when you're streaming video games, that means you don't actually own the video game's console or the game itself. You're streaming it from a computer which can be hundreds of miles away. All really boring technical information. But there's 2 interesting bits about this. Those data centers have actually got to be quite close to the people who are playing the games, otherwise you get what's lag. You move a character to the left, and because the data's got to go there and back, it takes too long and you get a lag. So that means there's going to be huge data centers all over the country pouring out huge amounts of electricity, because streaming is hugely bad for the environment. Because basically you're tripling down on the amount of electricity needed. So 1, we're moving into an extremely environmentally hostile environment, and 2, data and who owns the data networks is going to be hugely important in the future. So it was actually a really strange little conference, but for what's going to happen in the next 10 years and how we consume our media, we're going to go through a very, very strange period of time.
Have you got any skateboarding ducks?
No skateboarding ducks. New York Times. We've actually got that blind Donald Trump being led by the Netanyahu dog.
That was an overtly anti-Semitic cartoon, which and the New York Times has got previous, but their reaction to they put their hands up and said, you know what, we've printed an overtly anti-Semitic cartoon that could have been out of the 1930s, but their reaction is nuts.
It's nuts, because the Sunday Times has published cartoons of that ilk, and everybody does it. It's a very easy trope to fall victim to when you're trying to draw.
So, as I understand it, they're not going. I mean, they didn't do that many political cartoons, but they're not going to do.
They didn't do any in the domestic edition, and now the international edition is going to drop. And it's really sad, because the actual market for cartoons across the globe is shrinking enormously. And then there's
why is that?
I think it's down to people not caring. I think it comes down to economy. I don't think people want to pay for cartoons. There's some new news banks. They started to do what they've done for photographers. Photographers now contribute their images to these image libraries, who then sell the images to. There's now cartoon banks which do the same, which have sucked all the profits out of cartoon for cartoonists. It's basically giving a few people who control in that industry a lot of money. And I just don't think there's people who are interested in the art form inside. I think you need an editor who's strong and interested in it. And I don't think they can be bothered defending it, because, again, I mean, it's a little bit like the Joe Brand thing. It's easy to say, this cartoon's gone over the lines. Do you know what? It's not bother. Let's not have that kind of comedy anymore. Let's not have cartoons which might say things which are difficult and challenging. It's easy just to cut it out and stick with prose. And I think that's what it comes down to. It's very sad.
Moving on, because we've got another last week's podcast this week of all the... it's not the errors this week, it's more the context. But go on.
Two more. Matt Fiore, the creator of the Pepe the Frog meme, has won £12,000 from InfoWars. This is another cartoon story. His cartoon frog had been appropriated by the right-wing movement in America. He didn't want that, so he's actually stopped InfoWars using it, which is good, because I think it's terrible. It's been a terrible little story simmering away for a couple of years. The US House Intelligence Committee held its first meeting on deepfakes this week. We've been talking a lot about deepfakes, but finally the American government's sort of listening and possibly going to be a bit more proactive. Lastly, here's a kind of, one-legged duck or whatever. There was an interesting story. A Wigan mother needed a new carpet gripper for her stairs. So she contacted her local carpets at home, who asked her for a photo of a staircase so they could quote her a price. So she sent her photographs of a staircase off, but unfortunately she also sent a picture of her bare backside after she'd which she'd taken it after a sunbathing session. So she was naturally ashamed of this. But thinking about it, what I can't fathom is, if you're so ashamed of having accidentally sent in a picture of your naked backside to the carpet fitter, why would you then post it to social media where it can be picked up by every tabloid in the country who have now reprinted pictures of her naked backside? Its story makes no internal logical sense for me. Do you not agree?
Yes, I mean, I'm casting aspersions that maybe she wanted said picture, but I don't know anything about the story, so that's not really fair.
I'm simply an exhibitionist, but yeah. So there you go. Naked backside.
Okay, I've only got one things we lost in the mire because we are so
We're
far
all right.
gone.
You say that last week and we were perfectly on time.
No, we weren't. Oh, never mind. Migration news. Venezuela's President Maduro reopened the border with Colombia this week. 70,000 Venezuelans poured out to go shopping for the day, and 30,000 of them didn't come back. And linked, asylum applications into the EU from January to April this year are 15% higher than they were the same period last year, and that rise is attributed to applications from Venezuela. Last week's podcast this week. Right, you remember we talked about Jean-Paul Sartre's Fear of Lobsters?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, and the artist who walked his pet lobster in Paris was actually the poet Gerard de Nerval. He conducted his crustacean... Isn't that a lovely sentence? He conducted his crustacean about at the end of a long blue ribbon. Challenged to explain himself, he said, "And what could be quite so ridiculous as making a dog, a cat, a gazelle, a lion, or any other beast follow one about? I have an affection for lobsters. They are tranquil, serious, and they know the secrets of the sea."
Okay,
and the lobster... Sorry, go on.
Well, the reason you walk cats, dogs and lions and everything else is speed. How fast does a lobster walk?
Well, this is it. I do suspect he dragged it, but his lobster was called Tybalt, and he had liberated it from a lobster net in La Rochelle. His attitude was not a casual eccentricity. He followed in the footsteps of Pythagoras, who, as you'll know, was a strict vegetarian. And so it's all explained in a poem by Nerval. "So you alone are blessed, you free-thinking man, in a world where life sprouts in everything. You seize the liberty to dispose of the forces you hold, but in all your plans a sense of the universe is lacking. Honour in each creature the spirit which moves it." In other words, he believed in God and not eating animals.
Anyway, for next week's podcast, you're going to have to find out how fast a lobster can walk.
Oh, that's a very good point. Oh, yeah. I suggested that the E3 bus in West London went to Hammersmith. I'm terribly sorry if you ended up in Hammersmith. It doesn't. It goes to Greenford. We both wondered what a frog's feet are called.
Yeah.
Well, a frog's front feet are called hands.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, because when they jump, they land on their front hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the back feet?
The Hovisad...
Back feet, what are they called?
Feet.
Okay, go on.
The Hovisad, about which I said, as good today as it's always been. I don't know why I said that, because, well, I do, because I always, when I was a kid, I thought that they'd filmed it in Yorkshire, but they'd filmed it in Devon, and in fact, the actual quote is said in a Devon accent, so I'm sorry about that.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny, you pick up these things, and because I thought it was Hovis, which is not, anyway. The Italian name Ricci, Ricky, is pronounced Richie.
Okay.
One of us, and I won't say which one it was, but it was you, said that all singing comes from the throat.
Okay, go on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, as it happens, David, most of your singing, as you might or should know, comes from your diaphragm.
Does it?
You should always seek to avoid singing with your throat. If you do, you'll become hoarse and get a scratchy throat, and your vocal cords will become inflamed. I'm not reading this, I just know this stuff. Now, throat singing, a guttural style of singing or chanting, is one of the world's oldest forms of music. And this is the bit I didn't know. In throat singing, a singer can produce 3 notes simultaneously.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That must be to do with the fact you can make different noises from different parts of your throat, maybe, is it?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, maybe.
But if I was to play this, would you know what the next section is? Are you ready?
Okay. Do you want to play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend.
Oh, I should have known it because I do a cartoon of it this week, didn't I?
Say hello to my little friend. Yeah, it's from Scarface, which of course is part of the theme of
drugs.
Drugs. There you go. But I hadn't actually got anything to say about films, so shall we move on?
Okay, go on, move on. I'm trying to remember what was the name of that actor we forgot last week out of Anchorman.
Ron Burgundy.
No.
Oh no!
I forgot it again. I actually looked it up and immediately said, I'm going to have to look it up.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. It's a race. It's a race. Ron Burgundy, and everyone else knows this. I know.
Will
I'm really
Ferrell.
sorry.
Will
I know.
Ferrell.
I know it was Will Ferrell.
Yeah,
Okay.
Will Ferrell.
Thank you. Right. If I was to play this in, do you know what the next section is?
No, sounds like Enya or something.
Yeah, well, it's our mystic philosophy section.
Okay.
Whether you have to guess the philosophy. You ready?
Oh, jeez.
Okay, who said, I can tell you the moments in my life which I developed, well, they came after failures. While the moments in my life in which I regressed came after success. Success distorts, it relaxes us, it tricks us, it makes us worse and helps us fall excessively in love with ourselves. Failure is the exact reverse. It is formative, makes us solid, it brings us closer to our convictions, it makes us coherent once more.
I know this one. It's Rory Stewart, isn't it?
No, it's Marcelo Bielsa, the Leeds United manager. No, it really is.
Oh, God. I was thinking that, yeah, okay. I'm going to have to answer that every week now, aren't I? I'm going to have to learn how to say his name.
I don't know why I've written this down. Goethe had a fear of dogs. I've written that down. Why have I written that? Oh, no, because Jean-Paul Sartre had a fear of crustaceans, and I just came across the fact that Goethe had a fear of dogs. Okay, it's the slightly interesting facts alarm sound. You ready for that?
Hey, I wanted to bring that up with you. You asked me to do that Danger last week. What the hell was that video about?
Oh, it's brilliant. Electric 6, Danger, High Voltage.
The man with the illuminated groin.
Yeah, it's a fantastic single and a fantastic video. Anyway, look. Are you ready for this week's facts?
Yeah.
We'd like to thank the Pacific Tree Frog, which sent that little clip in for us. This week's slightly interesting facts are about...
frogs?
Yes.
Yeah, it was Pepe the Frog I mentioned. You see, it's like we almost prepared this. But go on.
Well, and also, as you'll know, frogs have also, apparently, if you lick... Well, toads, although apparently... Yeah, if you lick them, some of them are hallucinogenic.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't know if it's true. Is it true?
No, I think so. Well, I don't know. Oh, God. Well, there's last week's podcast this week.
They used to hang them around people's throats, didn't they? For like, they put them in a little sack to cure different illnesses in like medieval times. Toads.
Do you mean that doesn't... Are you saying that doesn't work?
Only in Yorkshire.
All right. Well, people who study frogs are called...
Oh, God. Frogologists.
Not bad. Herpetologists.
Okay.
A frog skeleton doesn't have a rib cage. So if you hold a frog by the middle, be careful not to squeeze it.
Yeah, okay. Can I just mention at this point, I have one phobia in life.
Frogs?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I actually did. I can't. I'll scream if I see one. My mum's got the same phobia. It's weird. It's like it's been passed on. I don't get it. Yeah. So you could enjoy yourself.
So a spider is all right, but a frog...
it doesn't bother me. Spiders can pick them up in anything.
Look, while I do the next bit, why don't you just quickly Google fear of frogs, unless you know what the word is.
Oh, no. I'll look,
right, you Google it, and I'll do the next fact. Going by body length, only a flea can jump farther than a frog. Frogs can jump as much as 20 times their body length, while kangaroos can only jump 6 times their body length, and human beings are paltry 4 times their body... Well, some of them, 4 times. Have you got it yet?
Yeah. Do you want to know what it's called?
Frogophobia?
Frogphobia. It's just known simply as frogphobia. Or, I don't even know.
Well, I prefer frogophobia. Yeah, I think that's better, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Frogophobia. Yeah, I have frogophobia.
Anyway, this is a slightly interesting fact. Frogs have an extra eyelid called a nictating membrane, which slides shut underwater. And it's transparent, so they can still see, but their eyes are protected as they swim.
Oh, gee. Really?
That's brilliant.
Yes, it is.
Frogs breathe partly through their skin, and they drink water only through their skin. You know that you don't like frogs?
Yeah?
Hear there any more of that?
No, thanks. I'm alright as long as I don't imagine them.
Frogs. Think of something sort of green.
Slimy.
Say flippers. Yeah. Frogs shed their skins often, sometimes weekly, even daily.
Oh, really?
They eat their old skin.
Oh, Jesus, it's getting worse, isn't it?
Most frogs, you like this one, most frogs will drown if they stay underwater for too long.
Really? Unfortunately.
So you know what to do if you're ever in a pond?
Yeah, hold them down. Bio flippers.
Yeah. Frogs eat lots of insects and worms and spiders. But big frogs, like bullfrogs, may also eat mice, baby lizards, birds, lizards, fish, smaller frogs, snakes, and giraffes.
Too evil, like giraffes. Wow, yeah, I can imagine it.
No, I might have made that last one up. Prepare yourself.
Yeah. This is gonna.
Right, prepare yourself. Are you holding on to your... No.
Previously, you were complaining about the podcast going on for too long, but I somehow think this is going to go on for another half hour now.
Are you sitting down?
Yes.
Okay. Oh. Sorry. Oh, God. Frogs have a row of tiny upper teeth.
Oh, I've never seen them that close.
Yeah, but they're just for gripping prey. Frogs swallow their food whole. I'm not surprised you don't like them. A lot of predators eat frogs, you'd be pleased to know, and the predators include fish, otters, herons, ducks, snakes, also land predators such as birds, owls, rats, foxes, hedgehogs, cats, more snakes, and giraffes, yeah.
I knew there was a reason I liked owls, otters, and giraffes.
Yeah. A bullfrog... A bullfrog can see you from behind, since its protruding eyes give it a protective 360-degree view.
Wow.
Frogs leap in a zigzag pattern. A frog's tongue can be as long as a third of its body length. Most frogs are nocturnal. Frogs are cold-blooded. They jump in the water to get cool, and they sit in the sun to get warm, and they really do sit on lily pads sometimes.
Wow.
I do have a dad joke related to frogs.
Go on.
It's awful.
Is it a Joe Brand's dad joke?
No. Chicken goes to the local village library, hops up on the desk, says, "Book!" Gets a book, puts it under its wing, off it goes, comes back the next day, book, book. 2 books, comes back the next day, book, book, book. You get the idea, yeah? Right. Librarian thinks, it's very odd. Took 3 days to work it out, but very odd. Follows the frog down the through the village, down the country lane, the chicken, down to the local village pond, upon which the librarian spies the chicken handing the frog each book going, book, and the frog is going, read it, read it, read it.
I must say, your chicken impression is extremely good. That's what we've discovered this week. I hate frogs, and you can do really good chickens.
I'll do accents, you know that.
I know, you've not done it for a while.
Right, I'd like to leave you with the 1971... Oh, sorry, would you like to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Watch out for frogs. And Boris.
This
is from 1971. Goodbye.
Company and the real thing. The world wants today. Harmony and dignity, and I'd like to buy the world a coat and keep it company. It's the real thing. What the world wants today. It's the real thing. What the world wants today.
The end is in sight.
The colourful phrase used by a charismatic figure.
is the Trump shutdown.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the nation